so wonderfully healthy. They talk about the Blue Zones diet, where
Right.
the most long-lived people, what they eat. And beans are a staple in the healthiest diets around the world. So to the extent bean and veggie gas relief can make those available to you again, then it's a healthy, healthy addition to your diet.
Well, just a reminder, at the top of 10 p.m. Eastern Time, the official world launch of Choco Nouveau Cafe. We're excited about that. And then at the end of 10 p.m., stay with us for my pick of the new year from Andrew's line, one of my all-time favorites. I cannot ever do a show without wanting to talk about Ultimate Friendly Flora. Andrew turned me on to this a couple years ago now. I learned all about the facts that this is truly the benefit of the world's finest probiotic, one that doesn't need refrigeration, one that is more stable than ever before, more beneficial than ever before. And Andrew, with this type of number, the most potent, isn't it?
Well, when you're looking at a probiotic product, and we've had 25 billion in our Ultimate Friendly Flora. We have a lower amount in our typical, our regular Friendly Flora. But the key to the product are the strains themselves, the specific species of probiotic organisms that we selected. And because there are thousands of organisms, thousands of strains that one can choose from, but what I decided to do was I followed the science. I went to where the research is, and the research are on the most important strains that will most determine our response to our immune system, our digestive system. So our Ultimate Friendly Flora targets those specific strains that have the most research. There's all sorts of exotic strains out there that people make all sorts of interesting claims about. But as far as I'm concerned, the most abundant science targets these strains that we've utilized. And we made sure at 25 billion colony-forming units per capsule, you're getting a quantity that will make a meaningful difference in supporting your digestive system, supporting your immune system, because as much as these probiotic organisms, they're not a part of our body, but these probiotic organisms in our colon, say,
right,
outnumber the cells in our body. So there are more probiotic organisms in a healthy colon, or should be, than there are cells in our body.
That's crazy.
That's how important they are to healthy digestion and immune function.
There's so many things, though, that challenge us, and I know we mentioned it earlier, but again, one of the key reasons for me, Andrew, was back to some of the things that we're taking. Maybe in the past it's been the PPIs, the proton pump inhibitors, or things that we're taking, again, for other digestive issues. We need to help put back into our body.
Well, many of us are taking antibiotics, and sometimes, even at low doses, but we take them frequently.
Yes.
Proton pump inhibitors affect the pH of our digestive system.
Right.
When you affect the pH of the digestive system, it'd be like someone changing the thermostat in your house.
Right.
That you're changing a critical component of the environment of these organisms. And as such, you can change the complement, the population, the quantity, the balance of those organisms. So our probiotic organisms are a critical part of who we are. They talk about the gut-brain axis, that there is no separating our gut from how everything else functions in our body, in particular our brain. So as many experts would say, as goes our gut and the probiotic organisms in our gut, so goes our brain and the other systems in our body as well.
Well, just to give you an idea, I have a review that we just pulled up to read to everybody. And again, we invite you at any stage, go on to hsn.com, search Andrew Lessman or vitamins, and you'll certainly see all of Andrew's products. Read the reviews. Take a moment to really understand and to see what people are saying. This one is titled Can't Live Without This. I absolutely can't live without Ultimate Friendly Flora. I've been taking this since 2015. I've not had any stomach issues since. I was always bloated, could not eat certain things, and always felt awful. I went through many tests for my constant bloating and upset stomach, and they could not find anything wrong. I started taking this and haven't had a problem since. I ran out last year during a move and had to wait to order. I went about 2 weeks without it, and the issues started to come back. I will never be without it again. I bought enough to last 2 years. Thank you, Andrew, for such a great product. But Andrew, once you realize the benefit, it is hard to live without it.
No, a healthy digestive system, a healthy immune system absolutely requires a healthy complement of probiotic organisms. They're not drugs. They're not medicine. This is just a very straightforward part of who we are. And it's been part of who we've developed as human beings. This is how we work. So we can't have a healthy digestive system. We can't have a healthy immune system without a healthy, balanced complement of probiotic organisms. And all we've done in this product is delivered it stable, so you don't have to worry about refrigeration. And we followed the science, delivering the most important organisms at their proper level.
If you'd like to order yours, pricing is fantastic, $30, $60, $90, or $180. A product I take literally without exception, regularly. I never want to be without Ultimate Friendly Flora for a million reasons. Big impact on my life. You have to give it a go. 5-star reviews, plenty of them, 1,400 to be precise. We're going to head over this way to our next item. Just a reminder, if you love Andrew's Choco Nouveau, the world's most delicious, creamiest gourmet chocolate